Welcome everybody, it's Lewpac here with another Albion Online tutorial video. Today we're going to be looking at 10 abilities that you have to watch out for in PvP situations. I wanted to give everybody, particularly the new players, some information about certain abilities that aren't completely obvious, and you really do need to know their mechanics when you're getting into PvP situations. So we're going to break them down in order for you today. Obviously, there's certain abilities in this game, such as the Flame Tornado, which you'll see here, that are very, very big and very, very obvious. It's a giant damn tornado of fire. You don't stand in it or you will burn to death. That is a very, very obvious ability. But some abilities have little slight visual cues that you have to watch out for, or they have certain mechanics you have to be aware of. So today, we're going to take a look at some of those for you. The first ability we're going to take a look at today is Retaliate on the Hunter's Hood. Now this is an ability, you'll see 3 little red shields around the enemy, and what this does is increases your resistances, but it also reflects damage back at the person attacking. So if you see this activated, you need to be very, very careful about not doing too much damage to the person. Be aware that it will reflect the damage at you. As you can see here, I'm going to Pyroblast into Frank. And the reflect, basically, I'm not wearing chest armor, but you can see that the reflect there does a lot more to me than it does to him. So when you see that reflective shield, you have to be super, super careful of what you throw. The best thing to do is try and disengage from the fight straight away until the Retaliate's gone, or you can possibly purge it. Now, there are some other damage reflect abilities in the game for you to look out for. The Spear has one called Deflecting Spin. The Leather Jackets have the Inferno Shield. And Cloth Armor has the Frost Shield. In order of those 3, they don't reflect as much as Retaliate on the Helm. Retaliate does 100%. Deflecting Spin does 80% of the damage. Inferno does 30%. And Frost Shield only does 10% reflect. But they're all things that you need to be wary of when you are fighting somebody with one of those skills. You do not want to be reflecting excess damage back onto yourself. The next ability we're going to look at is Bloodlust on the Mercenary Jacket. Now this is an ability that every time you do damage while it's activated, you heal yourself. And it lasts for 8 seconds or 15 hits, whichever comes first. So when you see somebody activate this, they'll get a little red glow on them. And again, much like Retaliate, you need to disengage or make sure that they do as little damage to you as possible. So you can see here that as he's got the Bloodlust on, he's actually healing during combat, which in a 1v1 situation can be particularly brutal. Tips for dealing with this would be get away from them if they're melee. Going invisible is actually a really good counter, because if they can't see you, they can't hit you, and then they're not healing. Another great one is actually Ice Block, because Ice Block reduces all damage to 0, and 0 damage also means 0 heals. Ice Block lasts 6 seconds, the Bloodlust lasts 8 seconds, so you can actually negate 75% of its duration that way, which is pretty good. The next item we're going to take a look at is the one-handed crossbow, or the light crossbow exploding shot. Now this ability fires a exploding bolt at the target, which after a few seconds will explode and do a moderate amount of damage. When they combine it with Sunder or other armor pierces, it does a seriously high amount of damage. The main thing when you're facing this ability is look for the little flame on you to indicate that you have it. Look for the timer on your debuff window to show you. And then on top of that, you need to know that it's an area of effect when it goes off. So if you run to your teammates while you have exploding shot, you are going to hurt them as well. You're going to give them even more value for the exploding shot. The best way to counter it is to do some sort of hard block. You can use evasive jump, or in the case of Fullbeard here, you can see that he uses the Soldier's Helm to negate the damage. Now, please be aware though that even if you do negate the damage yourself, it still can hit your teammates. So at the absolute minimum, you need to get away from your teammates. The best case scenario is you get away from your teammates so you don't hurt them, and you block the ability. That's the only way to completely negate it. The next ability we're going to take a look at comes from the one-hand curse staff, or the normal curse staff, and it is Death Curse. Now this is something that gets built up over time using vile curses. Then you apply the Death Curse and you'll see a big skull appears above your head, and right after that it's going to pop and bang goes his health. So that is what it looks like, a big red skull. And now it's similar to Exploding Shot in that it's got a delay before it goes off and you have to watch out for it. But different, it doesn't do any AoE damage. It only hits you, the main target. This means that you need to get your timing perfect, but you do want to hard block this ability if you can. You'll see the debuff ticking away, and if you time it right, like that, or not like that, sorry, Frank missed his timing there. He was a little bit early on his block, but you can actually block the ability. The next ability we're going to look at today is Fury on the Soldier's Armor Plate chest piece. Now this is an ability that when activated gains stacks every time you take damage. And as you take damage, it builds up your crowd control abilities and your damage output. So if you see someone activate Fury, you need to be very careful not to hit them too much if you're not going to purge it. Because the more you charge them up, the deadlier they're going to get. And if they get to maximum stacks, they're going to be able to hit you for a phenomenal amount of damage in return. On top of that, any CC they're doing is going to have a much bigger effect. You're going to be crowd controlled for much longer, stunned, silenced for much longer. If you saw my build spotlight on the cancer tank, you'll see how the Fury chest piece synergizes really well with certain CC builds and ramps up their damage. But the main advice is if you see somebody activate Fury, just avoid hitting them as much as you can. And if you're playing against somebody using a Fury build, you want to refrain from applying any sort of dots to them. So that's poisons, vile curse, bleeds, any damage over time abilities. Every single tick will give them Fury stacks. And of course, that's a very bad idea. The next ability we're going to look at is the Great Nature Staff and the ability Living Armor. And this follows on nicely from Fury because it's kind of like the defensive version of Fury in a way. What it does is it increases your resistances with the Living Armor buff, but also every time you're damaged, it will actually heal you. So whereas Fury, if you hit the target, they're going to cause you more damage. If you hit a target with Living Armor, they're actually going to be healing up instead of taking damage because they get plus resistances as well. Now, the same rules apply as with Fury on the Soldier's Armor. You don't want to be applying dots to them. You want to avoid poisons or any sort of damage over time abilities because they can use this to proc more heals off of Living Armor. When they combine that with the passive heals of the Nature Staff, they're actually going to be regenning very, very quickly. The best way to deal with the Living Armor is to just either ignore them until it finishes, or perhaps purge it off. If you do happen to have a Fiend's Cowl or any sort of purge, you'll be able to purge it off. The next ability we're going to look at is from the Cloth Cultist Cowl, and it's the ability Inner Corruption. Now this applies a 7-second debuff to the target, aka you, and every time you use an ability or attack, it's going to do damage to you, the target. It's not that easy to spot. It's a little red glow, but you want to be super, super careful when it's applied to you. As you can see, from zoomed out, you've got to notice you have it, and every time you attack, you're actually going to be hurting yourself. So the more you're attacking, the faster you're attacking, the worse it's going to be for you. One of the options when you do have it is to actually cleanse it. It is cleansable, but the main thing to do is if you have it on yourself and you notice it, you have to make sure that you only use absolutely essential abilities. Do not just be spamming abilities willy-nilly or auto-attacking just for the sake of it, because if you're a class that attacks very, very fast or uses abilities very, very quickly, the damage will quickly ramp up. The next ability we're going to look at is the Demonic Curse Staff and its ability Field of Death. Now this is a bit different from the other abilities we've taken a look at today, because it's actually very, very big and very, very obvious. But the reason I wanted to talk about it for the newer players is actually a lot of people don't seem that intimidated by it because it does very little damage. As you can see, I put it on full bid here, and he actually barely notices the dot. I mean, I'm quite low spec and he's quite high spec anyway, so a lot of these abilities aren't showing you their full potential. But the real damage from this ability comes from the fact that it reduces your healing taken by 60%. So this makes your healer 40% as effective as he usually would be. It really reduces his output big time. And if you're actually under kill pressure from multiple players and you're stood in a field of death, it's going to be very, very difficult for anybody to save you with healing abilities. So if you do see this, try and avoid it. If you feel that you're under pressure, if you think you're going to be a kill target, make sure you're out of the field of death. But likewise, if you're not actually under any damage pressure and you see a field of death go down, don't panic. Continue playing as normal, continue fighting, continue doing your job. Because a lot of people also see a giant AoE and they panic and they run out of it, regardless of whether it's doing damage or not. So just to reiterate, if you're under pressure, get out of the field ASAP. If you're safe and sound, just keep on fighting. Don't worry about the very minuscule damage output of this ability. The next ability to take a look at is actually from the dagger line. It's not specific to any one dagger, but it is Assassin Spirit. Now, certain daggers in the dagger tree, they actually get more powerful for their ultimates based on the number of charges you have. Now, charges can come in a number of ways. So what we see most dagger guys using is Sunder Armor, where they hit you, it applies one stack, and then they hit you again, it applies another stack. Assassin Spirit works differently. It actually charges up automatically without them doing anything. And it actually creates a very good visual cue that they're about to do their ultimate. It does mean that while they have those Assassin Spirit stacks as well, they take more damage. So that's something to be aware of. If you do have the potential to counterplay them, then be ready to do some damage to them because it will be amplified. But once they hit those 3 stacks, you can almost guarantee that a big ultimate is coming. Which means that if you do have certain abilities that can block, if you're using a block helm, ice block, something like that, you can almost predict what they're going to do because they're going to hit 3 stacks with the little icon in front of you and you're going to be able to see it coming. Which means if you're lucky, you'll be able to time it nicely, pop an ice block, something like that, and you'll be able to avoid it completely. The final thing we're going to look at in our list today is invisibility. And actually there are a few different types of invisibility in the game that you have to watch out for. So we're going to go over a few of them now because they actually behave differently, and knowing how to spot which invisibility somebody is using lets you know how to counterplay that particular invisibility. First, we'll look at the invisibility potion. Now, this one is fairly obvious because you do see a potion swinging animation and then the target will go invisible in front of you. There's also a little potion icon above their head when they use it. If they cause any damage, they get dropped out of invisibility, as you saw there. But on top of that, if you do any damage to somebody who's used an invisibility potion, it will bring them out of invisibility. So if you have like AoEs that are ground targeted or skill shots, and you can hit the person as they go invisible, you'll bring them straight out of invisibility. The next one we'll look at is possibly one of the most common ones you're going to be facing, and that is ambush from the assassin's jacket. This is actually also found on the gathering armors in the game, so if you're ever hunting a gatherer, you might see them use ambush, and this is an 8-second invisibility spell. Now, this cannot be broken by doing damage, but there are certain spells in the game, such as Field of Death and Mortal Agony, that will bring somebody out of invisibility. The key thing you need to learn about ambush, though, is that the person who goes invisible can't go more than a few meters from the location they went invisible at, or the invisibility will break. So as long as you know where they went invisible, you know that they can't go too far with it. So if you've got a gank group, for example, and a gatherer, you can spread out around them and just be ready for them to pop out of invisibility. If you're actually fighting somebody who's fighting back and uses invisibility, the other thing you need to know is as it charges up, the first ability they use out of invisibility is going to do a hell of a lot more damage. So be very, very careful with this, because it can actually hit you very hard. If it's something powerful like a magic missile from a warbow, you really want to avoid that first attack out of invisibility, because it can really, really sting. But other than that, just know that they can't go too far or they will be revealed. The next invisibility we'll take a look at is Spectral Run. Now this is similar to Ambush in that you sort of puff a smoke and you disappear, but this one you're actually able to move as far as you want. There's no limit on how far you can go, but this ability actually drains the character's energy. So you'll see here that I actually run out of energy before the cast is over and I'm revealed. So the main thing to look for with this, if you can't reveal them, is how much energy they had when they went invisible. That will give you a rough idea of how far they can go. The problem is, if they had a full bar of energy, they could be going in any direction. So it can be quite tricky to catch somebody with Spectral Run, but remember, they have no move speed buff. So if you do manage to catch them, you'll probably have superior mobility. The final stealth ability we'll look at is invisibility from the mercenary shoes. Now, this is a channeled invisibility, and this is the only one where you actually have to remain stationary. That's right, you cannot move at all. So what this one's actually used for is ambushing. Usually, you'll find a gank squad will have a scout up ahead. Then everybody will channel their invisibility when they know the target's coming, and bang, they appear on top of you, and you're in a lot of trouble. Now, while you're channeling the invisibility, you're building up a move speed buff so that when you come out of it, there is actually a great chance of catching your target, because you've got that move speed buff. The targets run right over the top of you because your scout has called it. And that's where you probably see Merc Shoes most commonly used, for portal ganking squads or zone border ganking squads. Those are the guys that love the Merc Shoes. Often, you'll get people chancing it. They'll just wait till your name tag first appears, quickly stealth, and then they'll be ready to hit you with that sprint. And you can see if you time it right, you can actually go quite far with it and very, very fast. So watch out for that one. There's also a stealth ability built into the Death Givers. That's just a normal 3-second stealth after the Death Givers use their E ability. If you want to see more about that one, you can check out my build spotlight on the Death Givers elsewhere here on YouTube. That concludes today's guide, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed this list of abilities to watch out for when you are PvPing. And I hope it gave you some ideas to how to play against them, counterplay them, and maybe even how to play with them if you decide to employ these abilities in your arsenal. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe the channel for more Albion Online updates. And you can always leave a comment below with more stuff you'd like to see. Cheerio.